Let me know what you. Okay, cool. Got it.
Alrighty. Hey everyone, this is Robert, and thank you for tuning in to Station Square. Hope everybody's doing well and having a lovely morning. Um, we are, whether you're in LA, New York, or whichever, like, or if you're in Australia, anywhere else, I hope everybody's doing well and fine for themselves. Today we have a very special guest in the corner. I say that to all of my special guests, but for this one in particular, they've been working in the industry, they've been in showbiz for a long time, like doing way too many things that I can't even if I tried juggling and listing off everything that they've done, we probably would be here for like 5 minutes or so. But today we have Miss Leigh Culbertson.
That's right, Culbertson. Yes,
Yeah, so thank you for joining me for the podcast. And yeah, I guess my
it's my
first question
pleasure.
is, how are you doing on this fine morning?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I
Good.
literally woke up like 30 minutes ago in case you couldn't already tell.
Nice. I understand that completely. Yeah, that's great. Sleep is
I
important.
literally rolled out of bed, but work gotta get work done today.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, yeah.
totally.
But yeah, I guess my actual first question is, what have you been up to these days? Like anything that you want to talk about this year in particular? Like, yeah, let's catch up and do a little bit of um, I guess what I usually like to do is like have a little bit of an icebreaker where we just talk about, what we've been doing recently and yeah, just all that good stuff,
Sure.
if you may.
Yeah. What have I been doing recently?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's a great question.
Yeah, what
Um,
have we been doing as
what
of
have we been doing? There
surviving the
is
apocalypse?
Yes, exactly.
You know,
Surviving. That's doing a lot
yes,
of that.
surviving. Yeah.
Um, where do I start? I mean, I've always got something going on. I've always got some project that I'm, developing, people I'm talking to, people I'm networking with. It's just kind of like the nature of the beast. It's actually probably my favorite part of this job is talking. It's like meeting with people and talking to them about ideas and coming up with ideas and developing ideas. Different producers, showrunners, writers, people who become my friends, people who are, good networking contacts and acquaintances, and just keeping the conversation going, especially now during such an uncertain time in the industry because of the writer's strike and the looming SAG strike. And there's a lot of layoffs going on at a lot of big um, companies and entertainment companies, and whether that's podcast companies, music companies, studios, all that stuff. And there's an ebb and flow to the industry. It's up and down all the time. So it's good to just have those projects that you're working on. Anything I can specifically talk about? I've been writing a lot of music recently. I'm actually a musician, a trained musician. And I've been getting more into that. I was trained as a bass player from childhood, and I'm also a singer. So I've been writing a lot of music recently and working on that, and writing opinion pieces because I have a lot of opinions, and always developing show ideas, film ideas, and things like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. Um, and yeah, we there's definitely plenty to talk about with the writer's strike and any other looming strike that may fall upon us.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Who knows what's gonna happen, but yeah, we can only hope for the best because I am an optimist.
Yes. Oh, me too. I'm an optimist
Oh
too.
yeah.
I'm kind of a nihilistic optimist. Like everything is
Oh,
absurd. Everything is
Everything is kind of
wild.
crazy. Like, did you know that the Earth's been moving for like centuries now?
Right, exactly. Everything has always been absurd. It always will be absurd. So you might as well just like have fun and smile while you're trying to,
Yeah.
make things
It's kind
better
of
for
like that
people.
one, yeah, it's kind of like that one meme that's been going around like, this is fine,
Oh yeah.
and everything's on fire.
That's a popular meme. When I worked at Warner Brothers, you would see
Yeah.
that on people's office doors all the time.
Oh, no
Everything's
way.
fine. Oh yeah. Because everything is fine, especially if you're making cartoons. Like, we're making cartoons, guys. Everything's fine. Like,
Yeah.
nothing is
Don't
so
worry.
stressful that it's.
No, it's not stressful at all. Oh, wait a minute. We don't have a job anymore.
Yeah. Wait a second. That's stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I guess we could just talk about, your beginnings. Like, was this always something that you wanted to do? Like, acting, producing, just everything that,
I
like I
think
said,
so.
like literally, if I list off everything that you do, it's like, yeah. So you've pretty much
I know.
done a bit of everything, like
Yeah.
puppeteering,
Yeah.
sing, like, doing plays and stuff,
I
like
know. I can't
audio.
stand
Yeah.
still. I can't
I
stand
know,
still.
me neither.
Yeah. I have too many
I guess we're kind of the
interests.
same way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've always been, I have ADHD, so I have that neurodivergent brain
Oh
where
yeah.
like I just like what's the next thing? I have so many interests and I can balance so many different concepts and interests and skills in my head, which is a really great asset. And it also, keeps me interested in what I'm doing. Um, but yeah, I would say I've always been interested in performance. I've always been interested in art. I started off when I was really young as a dancer and doing dance. Um, I have three sisters who always sort of like uh, came along for the ride as far as like making little plays and performances and stuff goes as a kid. And then as I grew up, I was in theater, I was in orchestras and jazz bands and all that stuff. Again, I can't stand still. And when I went to college, I was a theater major, but I wasn't even planning on being a theater major. I was planning on I think doing music or something, music therapy or something like that. Ended up being a theater major and kind of went from there. But the best lesson that I learned from being a theater major was living truthfully within the given circumstance. And that really applies to every kind of art and every kind of storytelling that you can do, whether you're acting. I mean, really the message was driven home for acting. When you're acting, you need to live truthfully within the given circumstance. If you're voice acting, that might mean that you are a speedy hedgehog that, is trying to save the world. Like, that is your given circumstance, and how do you live truthfully within that given circumstance? But if you're on stage in a play, it could be something else, but it applies to every kind of discipline, I think. And I've whether that's visual arts or performing arts. Um, so yeah, after college, I graduated kind of right into the recession in 2008, and
Oh my
yeah, cobbled together a bunch of different jobs that so I could make some money. I was a nanny. I worked front of house staff for a theater in Chicago. Um, I managed a traveling theater company. I did everything I could to sort of like keep my hands in what I wanted to do and still make some money. Um, and then when I was in my late 20s, I moved to New York City with the goal of, really putting my nose to the grind and getting into television production. And that's when I first moved there, I actually got a job as an art gallery assistant because I had a background in art museums and visual arts from some other jobs that I had. When I lived in Cleveland, I worked at the Cleveland Museum of Art. So I sort of leveraged that into some work that I could do in New York. But after that, I got my first job as an office production assistant at a reality television company called Haymaker. And um, reality television is, it gets a bad rap. I think not everybody likes it. Some people love it and they're obsessed with it, but some people are like, oh, it's trash. Um, I'm sort of like, there is good reality television, but there's also bad reality television. But the great thing about working in reality television is that you get to do as much as you can. I always like to suggest to people, if they're first starting out and they're trying to get into a television production or a film production, is to find a small shop, find a small production company, because they will ask you to do more than you are uh, sort of trained to do. So you get a lot of like on the job experience. So when I got that job there, I started off doing things like payroll and deliveries and scheduling and all that stuff. But they realized like, oh, she can write and she can produce and she can, develop and she can interview. So I started doing things like casting and interviewing people for casting. And I started writing log lines and pitches for them. I started going to meetings with people who we were interested in making shows with, whether they were like famous chefs or restaurateurs or whatever. And I got a lot of experience really quickly because it was a small company. And while I was doing that, that's when I was taking puppeteering for film and television, because I still wanted to sort of like keep myself going in things that I was really interested in. And that also kept me connected to a network of people that were like-minded. So while I was getting all this experience at Haymaker doing all kinds of stuff, I was meeting people in the sort of puppeteering and children's television circles. And so when I was done with my job at Haymaker, I could connect to that network through the puppeteering classes, and ended up getting my first job in animation through someone that I met in that class. So that's when I got my first job in animation on Goldie and Bear for Disney Junior, and really felt like I fit in there, which I didn't necessarily feel like I fit in at the reality television, but in my first meeting, I think at that job, I was like, oh, these are my people. These are the weirdos. These are the people who are doing voices and acting things out and like have no shame about being silly and being, themselves. So that's sort of like, that's what got me to that point, at least.
Yeah, that is amazing. Definitely answers a lot of questions that I had about like
Okay, good.
everything. um, yeah, morning rain. Um, Let me see. So I know that you were an animation coordinator for Goldie and Bear, and I know it. Um, and this one recently just ended, but the Animaniacs revival, 2020.
Yeah,
Um, so you were the senior assistant production manager. Um, yeah,
yeah.
how was it like getting to work on? I mean, first off, getting to be a part of the Animaniacs legacy, because I know the original came out in the 90s and now the new
Mhm.
one um just recently started in 2020, right when everything was kind of at uh because pretty much when, like I said, everything was kind of burning around the world, and Animaniacs kind of came at just the right time. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna put this lightly.
Oh,
Um, and now it recently just ended, like February, I think. Yeah.
yeah.
So how is it like getting to be a part of, that whole experience of being a part of the legacy?
Uh, I love this question because it was a really special job that I'm really glad that I got to do. Um, Again, the way that I got that job and the way that I get most of my jobs is through networking. I reached out to a someone that I worked with while I was living in New York who does the voice directing and casting out here, and let her know that I was coming out here, and she connected me to the person who hired me for Animaniacs. Um, just a quick like advice note there. But yeah, I was actually the first production person hired on that show besides the line producer. So when I came in, literally I was it. It was the only person. And got to really see the show get built from the ground up, which was an incredible opportunity just to see how things change from beginning to end. Um, the process, the production process. I was just talking to somebody the other day, and they're like, you know, does the production calendar look the same for every show that you look at? And it's like, well, yeah, there's a basic um, structure that most producers will use to plug a show into, but every show is different. And the way that Animaniacs is different is that it was basically a sketch comedy show, animated show, which makes things just a little more complicated. Um, like I feel like I'm going on a tangent, but that's okay. For instance, most animated shows are either one uh segment, 1 22-minute segment, like say The Simpsons or Bob's Burgers or whatever. They'll just have one story for the episode. Most preschool shows will have two 11-minute episodes. So they'll have like a part one and a part two. But with Animaniacs, they'll have anywhere from one to like five segments per show. And because it's comedy, we have to make sure that the jokes are landing. So there's all sorts of different like production elements that had to be tweaked and changed over the course of 5 years. So when I came in 2018, our production structure was completely different than when we had left by the time it wrapped, this year even. So that's just a little note about that, but it was so cool. I mean, I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 1985. So when Animaniacs came out, I think in 1993, I was 8. I mean, I was at the like prime like target audience for its heyday. So I grew up watching it. I grew up buying the CDs and listening to the music. I grew up like uh just just having it be a huge part of my life, and all of the references that they had on the show that were things that would have completely gone over my head because I was a kid. Like there's a Christopher Walken joke from the 90s. There's a aliens joke from the 90s. There's a Prince joke from the 90s, and all of that stuff like totally would have gone over my head, but the show made me feel like I was in on the joke. So it was like this little like cultural education that I got as a child, which is actually really cool. And that's what we tried to do again on the reboot of the show. We tried to like use references that our generation would understand, but have a younger generation feel like they're in on the joke, so we can sort of bring them up to speed. So yeah, it was a really important show to me as a kid. When I got hired on the show, I had the theme song stuck in my head for like a year. That's like still hasn't gone away, I guess. Um and there's all sorts of stuff that like I remember being like, are we gonna have a live orchestra record the music like they did for the original? And they're like, oh yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's all this really cool stuff. And then of course meeting the actors and getting to know them was absolutely wild, because they were the voices of my childhood, not just from Animaniacs but from all the other things that they've done. Maurice LaMarche and Rob and Jess and Tress, and Frank Welker. Just getting to see them work and see what they can do, and Getting to know them as people was also really cool. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, honestly. Just like the people that I got to work with were so incredibly talented. It was like an education for me. It was an education in storytelling. It was an education in like uh longevity and like, I mean, Steven Spielberg is the executive producer of the show. And although I never got to meet him personally, he did send us notes that we had to apply to the show. And you always have to apply Steven Spielberg's notes. Like there's no, you can't say no to his notes. And there were things that he would send us that I was like, oh, okay, this is a master storyteller. And he knows that if we just tweak this thing, it's going to work. It's going to make the scene work or the joke work or the shot work. So I got to learn a lot from him too. Uh, yeah, it really was like nothing else I've worked on, and I don't think I'm gonna work on anything like it again. It almost like spoiled, kind of spoiled things for me.
Yeah. And I do want to talk to you about being coached by Lori Ellen. And if
Okay.
anybody, like, if you've heard of Lori, like, she was on SpongeBob, Metal Gear, Family Guy. She has a long list of credits of her own. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, how would you say that being coached by such a veteran actress, like Lori, how would you say that it also really helped you grow as a voice actress, like confidence, um, like just everything?
Oh my gosh, Lori's the best. She is just the best. She's turned into a good friend of mine because we're both, um, as we like to say, we came out sparkly. We just came out sparkly and we can't help it. Um, but when I first met her, a friend of mine, another voice actress, Justine Huxley, she recommended that I get some coaching by Lori. And when I called Lori and signed up to do this, she immediately was like, "Congratulations, you're on your way. You're embarking on this journey." And she's always just so positive and warm and encouraging and welcoming about using your skills as an artist or as a performer. Um, so, I mean, she just, I mean, how do I even start? When you love a person so much, where do you even start to talk about them? Um, she just made me feel like I could do it and I knew what I was doing. Um, but she also just she again, veterans, people who have experience, they just have very succinct notes and advice that they can give you. And that's the importance of having a good mentor and surrounding yourself with people who know what they're doing and have been in the industry for a while. um and she's hardworking too. I was just watching Father of the Bride Part Two. Don't ask me why, but I was watching that movie on Hulu the other day, and she walks on screen. She's in one of the scenes, just one scene in that movie in the 90s. And I was like, oh, there's Lori. There she is. And she was on Friends. She's like in a scene on
She
Friends.
was everywhere.
She's
Yeah.
everywhere. She's like an element, her voice is just everywhere. Um,
Yeah.
she's incredibly encouraging. She's incredibly kind. She's incredibly talented. She's incredibly humble and she's an incredibly hard worker. And she's
So
so funny. She's so funny. Um, so
she's
if
incredible. Yeah.
she's great. I mean, I mean, you can be coached. I think anyone can be coached by her. You just kind of have to sign up, but she is an asset if you can get a hold of her and get her to coach you. She's a great person for that.
Yeah. Let me see. What were some of your other favorites, like growing up? Like whether it be like games, movies, shows,
Other
media that
favorites.
you've also loved that really left a large influence on you.
That's a great question. Oh man, I'm like looking at my bookshelf. Like any clues? I just
I
like I
know, right?
said,
Looking at our posters and everything.
yeah, you have great reference behind you. Um, uh, I wasn't really a gamer growing up, but I I did watch a lot of cartoons. You know, I wasn't I didn't have cable until I was 16, and that was like 2011, 2001, excuse me. 2001, 2002 is when I got cable and I started watching a lot of cartoons in my teens because of that. So one of my favorites, and they actually just rebooted this, was Clone High, and they brought it back for HBO Max. And when I think it came out in 2002 on MTV, and it's so smart and it's so funny, and I think it did a really good job of tapping into the sense of humor that millennials had at the time. Because this was like post 9/11. We had all us teens had just like watched 9/11 happen on TV, and we're all like, what the hell is going on? And Clone High was like this funny, absurdist, TV show that sort of tenderly was trying to teach us about like loving ourselves and like what's important, and like to accept ourselves as we are through like these characters like Gandhi and Abraham Lincoln and Joan of Arc. And so that's one of my favorite shows. I still have to watch the reboot. That was a big influence on me, but also all those Cartoon Network shows at the time that were really big, like Dexter's Lab was huge at that time, and Johnny Bravo and Powerpuff Girls, like all those like Gendy shows. And I was I was just captivated by them, captivated by the music, the voice acting, the imagery, the writing. Loved all that stuff. And then of course, one of my biggest influences was Adult Swim. Do you know what Adult Swim is, right?
Oh, totally.
Oh, of course you do. Look at all of your animation stuff. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Adult Swim was huge for me because again, I was a teenager. I was staying up late watching cartoons, and so Aqua Teen Hunger Force was huge, and C Lab 2021, and all that sort of like absurdist animated humor that was like really engaging for me. There's actually uh so when I was in college, this was before streaming, my roommate Darcy had a DVD of a bunch of uh Adult Swim cartoons, and we would watch this DVD over and over and over again. And it had a show called 12 Ounce Mouse on it. Do you know this show?
Oh, I definitely heard of it.
Yeah, it's
I might
if
have
anyone
seen
wants to
it.
watch it, it's definitely like streaming anywhere Adult Swim
Yeah.
stuff is streaming. Um, it's
That's an
very
obscure
silly.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very silly, like crudely drawn, crudely animated, absurdist humor. Again, that's my thing. Um, and eventually, like years later, my girlfriend Darcy and I both got a matching tattoo of one of the characters on the show called the Rectangular Businessman, which is just a rectangle with glasses, basically. It's very silly. Um, and the other one's called Perfect Hair Forever, another very silly, absurdist show. Um, all it's like anime, making fun of anime, um, and very silly. So those are probably, when it comes to animation, those are probably the more influential shows. Sort of
Yeah.
obscure, absurd, silly, funny stuff, because especially when you're neurodivergent and like nothing, you don't really fit in to like all of the
Yeah.
normal shit that's happening around you. That kind of stuff attracts you because you're like, oh, the absurdity makes sense to me. Like the insanity and the absurdity and the humor and like making fun of everything that's going on. That makes the most sense to me. And that makes me feel comfortable and like I'm in the right place.
Yeah. And man, with everything that we're doing, like, when it comes to work, or if you're like, I don't know, doing something else. Like it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what hobbies we really have because we're kind of working like all day, all night, every day. I don't know. Yeah, time has kind of become like, hmm, it's like what even is time these days? We've kind of lost track, especially these last couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah. So what?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like trying to balance everything is like, how do we do it? We just kind of have our own little like, I don't know, ways that can help us, but everybody's wired differently. No one's
Yes.
like exactly the same.
Absolutely
Yeah.
true. Yeah. I do a lot of list making. I do just lists and lists and lists.
Oh,
That's like
that's a good idea. Yeah.
that's all that I learned that,
Yeah.
probably in college. I forget it sometimes. And then when I make a list and I get everything done on the list, I'm like, what the hell? All I had to do was write it down.
Yeah. It really is that simple.
Yeah.
I would talk more about like, the business stuff, like what's the best way to get in, or, I mean, I know from your experience, it's like you kind of shared your story about how to break into the industry. So we'll probably talk more about like, um, I guess the business side of showbiz. I guess we'll
Yeah.
probably save that for another episode in the future.
Okay.
But for now, this was a lot of fun, and I really enjoy, I guess, your insight talking about the different shows that you've worked on and
Thanks.
juggling so many different hats. And I really appreciated, just
Yeah.
what you're able to offer today.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
would
what?
have one last piece of advice, and the mantra that I've sort of had in my career that I try to let two pieces of advice that I always try to leave with when it comes to working in this industry. The first one is that understand that you have value just because you woke up this morning. There's no director or producer or boss or anybody that can give you your value. You already have it. And if you understand that you are of value just because you got up, that's going to help you go far. The other piece of advice is just to take action and have faith. Just take action towards what you want to do, any action, whatever that action is, and then have faith that it's going to move you forward towards your goal. Take action, have faith. And that's it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. And what, I guess you can just self-promote and share your like socials
Yeah,
and, all that good jazz so people can
sure.
check out your stuff.
I'm I think I'm at Leigh Culbertson on Instagram. LeighCulbertson.com is my website. Leigh's name here is on Twitter. Hit me up for whatever. I love talking. I love sharing ideas. I love coming up with stuff. So, and doing things like this. So thank you so much for having me on, Robert. I really appreciate it.
Yep, of course. We can always chat, like email, social media. Yeah, we'll just,
Be happy to.
just shoot the stuff.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and anything like last words and outro, like anything that you want to, yeah, conclude us?
I hope everybody has a lovely day, just like Robert said at the top of the episode. I hope everyone's doing well.
Oh yeah, yeah. And
Stay
one last,
positive, people.
yeah, one last thing. I love like everything that you got in your little background, like especially
Mm.
that uh let me see. The queen, like to your
Oh, it says, "Let me be perfectly queer." It's a
okay.
it's a
Yeah.
flag. It's my pride flag for the day, for the month.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
happy June, everyone, and
Happy June.
excuse me. Hope every can't talk. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day, and yeah, take it easy, take care, and I'll see y'all next time on Station Square. This is Robert Jackson. Uh, actually dabbing out. So take it easy, y'all. Peace.
Bye
Bye.
bye.